Let's dive right into this explainer today, where we're going to deconstruct the absolutely chilling, bureaucratic mechanics of societal collapse from the novel Speck of Dust I Lived On. This is just a fascinating story by Max and Claude that takes something we literally all dread, office paperwork, and somehow turns it into the primary lens for viewing the end of the world. Imagine the DMV, but, for the apocalypse. It's a completely unique take on a dystopian thriller. The monsters here aren't zombies or aliens. They're just middle managers armed with red pens and routing slips. So it makes you wonder, what actually happens when a civilization designs a whole system just to manage its own collapse? This question is at the very heart of our protagonist, Elara Voss's world. Elara is this meticulous, sharp-eyed data analyst at the Bureau of Terrestrial Continuity. For her, documenting the end of the world is literally just another day at the office. Think about that for a second. While society breaks down outside our window, the primary institutional response isn't panic at all, it's paperwork. As we're going to see, the system's survival instinct looks an awful lot like endless, suffocating documentation.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the architecture of decline, or the bureaucratic illusion of control.
Just look at this number for a second, 412. That represents the exact number of distinct forms used by the Bureau just to process the end of the world. Actually, it started with only 37 forms back in the 1960s, but as the ecological and infrastructural crises compounded over the decades, the bureaucracy didn't solve a single one of them. Instead, it just created more specific, highly nuanced forms to categorize the different flavors of failure. It's the ultimate bureaucratic reflex, right? Like if you can file it away, you can pretend you control it.
And the self-sustaining nature of this bureaucracy is honestly wild. The system's main output isn't salvation. It's just the system itself, endlessly churning out paperwork to prove it still needs to exist. Take Form 7 Delta, which evaluates coastal infrastructure under variable salinity. Then you've got Form 118, a cross-referential summary that literally requires 3 other forms just to be filed. Total nightmare of red tape. And then there's the ultimate paradox, Form 27 Omega. This is a document explicitly designed for declaring that a narrative or entity has completely ceased to exist. The paperwork is basically just spackling over the gap between the illusion of control and the terrifying reality of the disaster.
Okay, so picture Elara on the morning of March 14th. She sits down and she is facing 47 pending forms on her desk. The vast majority of her time is spent meticulously documenting environmental and infrastructural failure. We're talking about water tables failing, coastal grids rusting out, regional blackouts. Every single form in her inbox is this tiny micro-tragedy. A collapsed bridge over here, a failed crop yield over there, but it's all reduced to a sterile administrative assessment just waiting for her signature before it's filed away into oblivion.
So, managed decline is basically the ultimate institutional coping mechanism. Elara works in this highly secretive sub-department, and her job requires zero gap between what she knows and what she is willing to see. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. While the rest of the government is just pumping out optimistic public reports to keep the masses calm, her department is quietly building a classified, highly accurate shadow archive of total societal failure. They know exactly how bad it is, and their job is simply to record it accurately, entirely in the dark.
Which brings us right into Section 2, the Shadow Archive, finding truth in the aggregate.
Elara is brilliant because she notices absolutely everything, connecting the mundane to the catastrophic. To her, a coworker quietly moving his desk plant out of the sunlight, or the building's third-floor coffee machine suddenly sputtering out thin brown liquid, those aren't just funny office quirks. When you combine them with her massive data streams on failing supply chains and collapsing coastal infrastructure, they are macro indicators. They point to deep, systemic fatigue and the terrifying reality of what the Bureau secretly calls a Category 4 collapse. The apocalypse doesn't announce itself with trumpets, It starts with the office coffee going bad.
By cross-referencing these little anomalies, Elara and her colleague Marcus build shadow models that completely contradict the Bureau's official projections. The official stance at the agency is that the timeline is pending updated modeling, which is really just bureaucrats speak for burying their heads in the sand. But Elara's personal model, built entirely outside the shared systems, shows a Category 4 collapse actually triggered 5 to 7 weeks ago. And Marcus, who is a 19-year veteran of the department, ran a more conservative, older methodology that placed the collapse just 4 to 5 months out from December. The terrifying truth is just sitting right there in the aggregate data, showing that the point of no return is already way in the rearview mirror.
All right, let's move to Section 3, the language of collapse and reclaiming agency.
Now, I really want you to notice this chilling shift to the phrase acceptable acceleration. Elara receives this highly classified memo about a brand new office with this exact name. Because, look, you can't manage a decline forever. Eventually, the reality on the ground gets so bad that the language itself has to shift to accommodate the catastrophe. Acceptable acceleration is this brilliant, terrifying political term designed to reclaim agency over a disaster they literally cannot stop. It's the difference between a car crashing because the brakes failed and a driver proudly claiming, "Hey, I intentionally took my foot off the brake to save gas."
We've all heard corporate spin before, right? Covering up a bad quarter with buzzwords. But this is on another level entirely. The government eventually issues a public statement, planting the seed of an accelerated transition period to make the eventual catastrophe feel like a natural, managed economic phase. But what you really need to take away from this is the horrific omission. What they actually mean in the bureaucratic backchannels is an unmanageable systemic collapse where the transition cannot be managed for everyone. They've quietly decided to stop trying to save everything and start deciding what and who to just let fall.
Let's dive into Section 4, Two Paths to Resilience, the framework versus the network.
Faced with this whole acceptable acceleration reality, Elara and Marcus both see the end coming, but they have radically different ideas on what to do next. Marcus realizes that accepting a promotion into the Bureau's elite shadow operations means sacrificing his humanity for strict institutional compliance. Like he so profoundly puts it, the system doesn't value his 19 years of Sunday calls to his kids or his deep knowledge of his local community. To the Bureau, he's just a clearance level, just a cog in a dying machine. So he quietly refuses the invitation to join the inner circle.
It's a massive divergence. Elara actually chooses to infiltrate the Bureau's centralized framework. She stays inside to map the decline from the belly of the beast, gathering the official data as the system concentrates resources on essentials and actively abandons failing zones. But Marcus? He quietly builds a distributed network. He relies on unscalable human-level skills to prepare for the fallout. He leans on a daughter who knows how to garden, a son who's a master electrician, a neighbor who's a structural engineer. The Bureau abandons the vulnerable to protect a central, optimized core, but Marcus protects his community by weaving this localized web of resilience. It really makes you ask yourself, in a massive crisis, which model is actually more resilient? The isolated bunker or the interconnected neighborhood?
And that brings us to Section 5, the lag indicator and the final reveal.
Eventually, Elara transfers to the new elite department and is taken to this remote, highly classified mountain facility for orientation. And there, she meets Sina Maris, a wilderness systems ecologist. Sina completely shatters Elara's understanding of the timeline. She confirms that human institutions react exactly like failing ecological networks. Sina points out this devastating fundamental truth. The official record is always a lag indicator. The paperwork doesn't predict the future. It barely even manages to document the past.
So the Bureau didn't just recently discover the collapse. At the mountain facility, Elara reads unredacted, top-secret documents proving that the Office of Acceptable Acceleration had been secretly managing the collapse for 3 full years. 3 years! While the Department of Environmental Mitigation was just spotting analogs in November and Marcus was meticulously running his models in December, the architects at the top had already written off entire regions of the country. By the time Elara officially got the Category 4 memo on March 14th, the endgame had been in motion for over 1,000 days.
And this leaves us with a truly terrifying reality about institutional inertia. Bureaucracies don't save us, they merely document our demise in neat, color-coded folders. By the time the paperwork is actually filed and the official statements are drafted, the world they describe is already gone. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to chew on. When the very systems we rely on become the lag indicators of our own decline, who is keeping the actual record? Is it the bureaucracy, safely tucked away in a mountain, or is it the people like Marcus, quietly tending to the network out in the real world? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. I really hope it completely shifted how you view the mundane paperwork of our world.